Really appreciate the chance to talk to everybody about Tableau today. So want to start with just a little bit of discussion about what Tableau is, a little bit about what you'll see when you start opening it, and then we'll get into the meat of actually working through some analytics with it. So for those not familiar with Tableau, Tableau it's a visual analytics tool. So a lot of people, when they first start with Tableau, they think of it as Excel on steroids. And I preached that a lot when I first started using Tableau as well. And it is, but it's so much more than that. And it's just an amazing tool for really being able to visually dig into your data. You can create static charts with it, information that really provides a way to really hit people with certain information, show them exactly what they need, and get that out there. And I've seen a lot of posters that are made from it and used for data for good. And it's just an amazing way to do that. It's also used to create various dashboards in business and healthcare situations. And it's used just by analytics analysts when they're working through individual problems. And they can pull data into Tableau, work with it from there, and output an answer. And what I love about Tableau is it's focused on a term I've been using for 2 decades now, and I know I was talking about it a little bit in the chat, on creating actionable insights. So what we want to do when we get to actionable insights is create something that can immediately drive change. So we don't want to just create charts and visuals that people can look at and go through. I mean, it's great to create those tools, but as data scientists, what we really want to make sure we're presenting is a final output that the stakeholders can look at and know exactly what they need to do from there. They can determine options. So that actionable insight is being able to visually see what you need and make a decision based upon it. And Tableau is just a great tool for that. So there are a lot of different versions of Tableau, and it sometimes causes confusion. So I wanted to talk through them a little bit. If you are not creating visual analytics, there's a free Tableau reader. And that's just available. So we use that in my shop. We provide our stakeholders with that. And so we're able to just send them a specific viz that we've put together for them. They're able to open it in Tableau Reader, and it works great. But a lot of us, we're data scientists, we want to create things. So our next question is if we need to publish it privately or not. If we're publishing it privately, which most businesses are, then that's where we get into Tableau Server and the desktop versions, which are amazing tools there. If we're not publishing it privately to a server, then it's the evaluation of do we need to connect to a database or not. If we're connecting to a database, then it's Tableau Desktop. For us, what we're going to be using in here is Tableau Public. So Tableau Public is free. It's a great tool, and it connects to Excel files and text files, Google Docs, a number of different tools. Tableau Desktop is able to connect to SQL Server, SAP HANA, just loads of other systems. Both versions are able to connect with spatial files, which we'll be doing today. So before we get into that though, I want to talk just a little bit about data itself. So making sure we just have a little bit of the terminology of data. So we're working with structured data, not unstructured. Tableau can work with unstructured data, which are PDF files and documents and video files. But we focus on structured data, which is traditional database, Excel spreadsheet, those sorts of items. So when we're working with structured data, we can call it quantitative, which is numerical data, or qualitative, which is categorical information. Those it gets separated into additional subtypes. So quantitative can be defined as continuous, which is any real number. So analog speedometer, age, if you're counting it, down to the microseconds, pH balance, these are, infinite within the ranges that they're viewed at. It can also be discrete, which would be a digital speedometer or counting anything. That's going to be discrete numbers. So it's along a fixed range or interval. Qualitative data may be represented by discrete numbers within data sets, but it's non-numeric and can't be measured behind the scenes. So it may be ordinal, meaning there's an implied hierarchy to the data. So that Pane scale that we're all used to seeing in the doctor's office, it's got a hierarchy, and we may prescribe a number to those different items, but really there's no defined terminology behind it. So we also have nominal data where it represents only a label or independent category. So ethnicity, automobile class, blood types, that's all nominal qualitative data. And then we also have this special type of binary data, which is dichotomous. So that's always true or false, 0 or 1. Sometimes systems record it as -1 or 1. It just has those two options to it, and it's a special subtype there. And so those things get important. We have a question in the chat. Does that mean our projects published to Tableau? So yes, going back to Tableau Public, and we're going to discuss this a little bit more, but anything we publish to Tableau Public is available for anyone to see. You can hide it on Tableau Public. We'll discuss that in a moment. So we've gone through kind of our data types. So how do we then speak Tableau? So in Tableau, we have dimensions and measures. Dimensions are going to be those qualitative values. So those are names, dates, geographical data. And so that's where we can really dig in and segment information a lot. Measures are those quantitative numbers. So we can sum them, we can aggregate the data a lot better that way. It's measurable information. And so when we're working with a Tableau Viz, we need to distinguish between what our dimensions and what our measures are. For both types of data, there's some color coding to let us know when we're working with it if we're working with discrete or continuous data. So continuous data is always going to show as green. And again, think of continuous as that analog speedometer on a car. Discrete data is going to be blue, and that's a digital speedometer on the car. You're not getting those subsegments of numbers. It's going to be distinct intervals. So those are our dimensions and measures. So that's key terminology within Tableau. We also have several different items that we use within our Tableau workbook. So much like an Excel workbook, we have a Tableau workbook. There's just a lot more going on there. So we start with worksheets or views or charts. They have a number of different names. So that's where we're creating a single visualization so that we can discover meaning from that data. So it's where we start to get to actionable insights, but we might not be there yet because we're looking at a specific item within that viz. As we start to take vizes and put them together, that's where we have a dashboard. So it's a collection of several views. And a dashboard, again, may be something that we publish as is. It may be a dynamic tool that gets published. We have, within my shop, we do multiple differences with our dashboards. We have dashboards that are specific tools to allow our users to get and dig into the data and really start to see it more, and it's a great tool for that. We also have dashboards that are just static, that it was a one-time project, we put it up there, and it served its purpose. And so we're able to do that with dashboards. And then finally, we have stories. Stories get really interesting. So that's a sequence of visualizations, and it comes together to really convey information. And I love that Tableau calls these stories because it really makes sense. You tell a story with data, it walks people through it. And it's a fabulous tool. I don't see stories as much in business, although it is used that way as well, and is becoming a lot more broadly used in business. Generally, we're still with dashboards. Industry is always a little behind on things, but stories are an amazing tool for moving forward. So as we open Tableau, and hopefully everybody's installed it at this point. If not, we've posted the links before, and maybe you can post those again in there. But when you open up Tableau Public, and we're gonna all do that together in a moment, but eventually we're gonna get to our workspace. So I wanna talk through the different sections in the workspace. So at the top, just like any Windows application, we've got our menu bar and our toolbar, and that's where we're gonna access the usual tools. Down the left-hand side, we have our sidebar, and that's got our data pane and our analytics pane. So our data pane is where we can actually interact with our individual data fields, the dimensions, measures. There's also an item called parameters that get a little bit more advanced, so we won't be touching on those today, but it's another item that's in there. Our analytics pane is where we can apply various analytics to a view. We can start to apply trends and other items that way. We also have our view. It's also just called the viz. That's our canvas. That's where we actually start to put our visualization together. And it's important to note with Tableau, visualization is generally in terms of some sort of chart or graphic, but a viz can also be a data set. So it's why a lot of us start by saying it's Excel on steroids, because you really can start to build out just data that you can look at, and it's summarized in a really useful way. So you have to remember that a viz doesn't have to just be an actual graphic. And then we have our cards and our shelves. So this is where we can drag information into columns and rows. We can add marks and filters and multiple pages. And we're going to start to show some of this in a few moments here. But this is where we're really making the building blocks of our viz. This is where we start to change and really make it dynamic and unique for whatever we're doing. And then down at the bottom, we've got the various sheets that we've got. So that's where we navigate between our worksheets, our dashboards, and our stories. And then finally, there's the Show Me Toolbar. So as you start to get more advanced in Tableau, oftentimes you're going to get rid of this, but it's a great tool, especially for starting. So what happens is as you're dragging over your dimensions and measures, that Show Me toolbar is dynamically going to show which sorts of visualizations work with the data you've selected. And if you're not able to click on a visualization that's the one you want, you can hover over that and it will actually tell you what sort of dimensions and measures you need in order to do that. So it helps guide you. So we need to create our Tableau public profile if that hasn't been done already. So I'm going to walk through this. I'm going to ask everybody, please open up a web browser to also do this because it's important, because as part of the homework for the Tableau section, you're actually going to be publishing an item to Tableau Public and sending the link to us. So Tableau Public is a great tool there. It's just where you can really share what you're doing. So if you're in a data science master's program and you want to have a way to show your portfolio, you can throw some things up on Tableau Public. If you're working on data for good, whether it's with a big project or something that you're working with independently, you can throw it up on Tableau Public. They have 10 gigabytes of storage for everybody. Tableau Public is completely free. So it's just amazing. You can do a lot, get to know Tableau, and also get your information out there. So again, to the question that Isabel had, once you publish to Tableau Public, it is public, it's in the name. So you can go in and hide a viz if you don't really want it to be available anymore, or if you're still working on it, you can keep it hidden for just you. But once you unhide it, it is there available for the entire public. So if you're working with your business data, it's probably not something you want to use for that, because that's where you really need a data server. But if you're working with school information, if you want to do data for good, Tableau Public is just an amazing tool that's out there. So let's walk through creating your profile if you don't have one already. And so if you just go to public.tableau.com, up at the top right, you have the sign up page. And so if everybody's able to go to that for a moment, I'm going to give time just to make sure everyone can open a web browser. And again, it's just navigate to public.tableau.com. It's the same link that you used most likely to download Tableau Public itself. And if you've already signed up, that's great. You're ahead of the game, but we'll walk through it here. So once you click sign up, it's going to create a profile. There's not a lot of information that's being collected there. It's just your name, email address, and password. That's it. There's not anything after this that you have to go through some lengthy fill out. You just have one of those recaptchas that you have to go through that we all know and love so much. So if you go ahead and type your information there, I'm going to pause for just a moment to make sure that people have a chance in their web browser to create that profile. So put your name up there, your email address, pick a solid password. It's a company, so there's always the terms of service there. Complete that you're not a robot, and click create my profile. So at that point, hopefully everybody is here. It's taking you to your public.tableau.com profile. You can see mine out there, and some of these are early vizzes I created when I was first starting to get to know Tableau, so they're not great. Some of them are look bad and shrunk like this, but when you open them up, they're a little bit more interesting. Hopefully someday I'll have more time to put things up here, because I do love using Tableau. I love doing data for good, and I'm looking to be able to do that more. So it's just a great tool for that. It gets your information out there, and hopefully everybody is there at that point. So we're going to get into the actual Tableau soon. So everybody at this point, hopefully you've all got your profile created. Go ahead and open Tableau Public, which hopefully everyone has already installed on their computer. So go ahead and open that up at this time. While that's opening, because depending on your system, it may take a little bit for it to start up. Let's just go through the data set we're talking about again here. So much like in the Python and R classes, we're using the San Diego Police Stops RIPA data set. So this is amazing that San Diego makes so much information public. I did a small research paper a couple years ago before it was the RIPA data set, and San Diego was still making that police information public. I learned a lot from analyzing it myself. I've lived in San Diego most of my life, and I have my own impressions of San Diego. And obviously they're based on my own, implicit bias from my own background and those things that we really try and combat in ourselves. But doing a study on this data set, and even just doing a small study led to so many insights and really made me see our town differently. There are things that make me feel great about it, and things that make me feel good that the data is out there, so that we can all really see what does need to be changed. So it's a wonderful data set. Appreciate that San Diego puts it together. So that's what we'll be working with. This data is joined through both a stop ID and individual person ID, because there may be multiple people involved with any stop that occurs. The data dictionary is available. We aren't going to pull that into Tableau, but it's available for anyone that wants to look through it a bit more. The specific data set that we're going to be working with, there's been a little bit of cleanup that was done by Dylan Orr early on in this. So that's what we've provided for everybody to download. So hopefully you have at that point. If you haven't downloaded the shape files, please also download those. And I'll show where we want to load those to in just a moment here. So with that, let's actually get started working with Tableau. So I'm going to switch my screen a moment here for what's being shared. And just as a reminder to everybody, so you would have downloaded both a CSV file as well as the shapefile zip. So at this point, let me share this a moment. You should have a folder on your computer that looks like this. So you've got your police stop data dictionary, you've got the police stop file, you've taken the shape file that we provided, which are the police department beats, so the individual sections that San Diego PD identifies, and you've unzipped that. And so you should have several different shapefile types and a data dictionary for that shapefile. To make it all easy, let's all keep it in just one folder. It'll make it easier for us to find later on. And so what we're going to start to build, and apologies for switching between screens here. I want to make sure that there's a good chance to see all of this. So we are going to begin a little bit differently than is normally done with Tableau. So because we're a little bit limited on time today, I wanted to make sure to provide this first. So normally when you're starting to learn Tableau, you're going to start with charts and graphs and walk through things that way. What I want to start with right away is creating this, which is a view of the police beats in San Diego. And then we're going to start to do a little bit more with it from there. So I think that while creating a map and using custom shape files is a little bit more advanced for Tableau, I think it's a great start because it's still beginning users can do this. You can start to really see the power of Tableau. And I want to make sure that we don't run out of time for this and that we have time to answer any questions that occur because it is so powerful. And if you can do this, you can go back and do any other chart. And time permitting, we have several other charts that we're going to go through. So with that, one more change of sharing my screen here. And we will start going through actually putting this together. So when you first open Tableau, this is what you're going to see. And I already have a file here. Yours is going to be blank. So this is Tableau Public. If you're opening Tableau Desktop, the Connect is going to have a number of more options for you here. But for Tableau Public, we are limited to these specific file types. So Microsoft Excel, text file, JSON, an Access database, which is really strong. Even through Tableau Public, they're giving that database interaction. PDF, spatial files, and then to a server, you can connect to Google Sheets and use a web data connector. If this was the full Tableau desktop, there's just a myriad of others items that we can open as mentioned earlier. So what we want to start with here is connect to a text file. And so make sure to navigate to wherever you've saved all your information. So that folder where we've got our police stops, that folder where we've got our shape files, everything. And we're opening up a text file because that's what a CSV file is at the end. So that police stops data file, go ahead and click on that and get it open. Trying to make sure I'm following chat here. Oh yeah, very good point there. That Tableau considers a CSV a text file. So yes, we can all open it in Excel, but at the end of the day, it's truly just a text file. You can open it in Notepad and interact with it from there. So you should see this now, which is your data source screen within Tableau. And if you want to see your data, if you have a stronger computer, you can do the automatic update, and that gives the data more real time. So at this point, you're now seeing what was opened, and you've got where Tableau is showing you your type of data that it has read. So it reads stop ID as a number, it reads the date of the stop as a date, and you've got some small icons in there. Follow along on your own computers, and you'll be able to see those individual items. I know some of my font shows up a little small. My monitor doesn't always resolve well for Zoom, so please make sure that you're following along on your own screen with this as well. So we've got our police data stops pulled in. And the other item that we want to pull through at this point, we're going to go ahead and right away, we're going to add the spatial file. So for this, we're going to use the PD beats data SD GeoJSON file. So that was unzipped from the spatial file that was downloaded. Go ahead and click that, click open. And now we have those other files showing there. So we have our police stop data. We're going to take and click on the GeoJSON file, and we're just going to drag it over. And you see, I don't know why I was trying to point to it because you can't see what I'm pointing to. You can see that orange line is starting to connect those. And that's because Tableau knows that you want to start to make a join there. So if we have this box that'll pop up, we can edit the relationship. Tableau actually just recently, in the past version or two, changed how relationships worked in Tableau. It's a lot more powerful now. So we've got performance options. So Tableau is going to look at the data and it's already going to say how it thinks that data works together. If we want to specify it a little bit more, we know that our police stops data, we're going to have multiple stops per beat, whereas our GeoJSON is going to have each beat that's listed. So what we're really looking at is a one-to-many relationship, or going the other direction, a many to one. So we have many police stops per beat for each beat shapefile that occurs. And just to discuss shapefiles a little bit. So they've been around for a long time now. I first learned of them myself back prior to ArcGIS 1.0, which ArcGIS is a geographic information system that's used in a lot of different areas. And yeah, it's more advanced geographic tool than Tableau. But Tableau lets you do a lot more analytics more automatically with your data. So they really have different purposes there. And I'll go back through all of this in one moment here on how we drag this, just to make sure that everyone is caught up on that. But just to speak on the JSON file, what this is doing is it's actually creating individual polygons. So we're going to be looking at a two-dimensional map. And so each polygon is something that's described in that GeoJSON so it can visually draw it on the map. And that's what a shapefile is. So it's a file containing shapes that the system is able to interpret. And we'll see these in a moment. So let me go back really quick here and let me remove that GeoJSON file again. So when we first opened Tableau, we clicked on open a text file. We double clicked on our police stops data. That got us to this point where we're seeing the CSV. If you're not seeing the data here, just click automatic update and the data will show up. And depending on your computer, it may take a second or two. We then went back and added a spatial file and we clicked on that GeoJSON to add it in. That gave us the connection to these other shape files. We click again on the GeoJSON and drag it over into the screen here. So we're just once clicking and dragging it over and we get that orange connection here. And now we release and it'll take a moment and we'll have those two together. So hopefully everyone is up at that point. The edit relationship is here. We can go ahead and adjust that because it's really a many to one relationship. And we want to make sure we capture every police stop data. And what this is saying is that even if a police stop doesn't have a beat, so it can't tie it to the shape file, we still want to pull it through. It's not going to work when we map this, but we still want it to come through. If a beat isn't represented in our police stop data, well, we probably don't care about it then because that's not really what we're looking at. So we can go ahead and close that. And at this point, we can now move forward. So we have our data set put together. We've got our police stop data. We've joined it to our GeoJSON file. And so you can see here the interpretation of the GeoJSON. It's got an object ID. It's got the beat number. It's got how San Diego PD has named each beat. So these are the police beats. Think back to watching old school police shows where they talk about walking the beat, and probably still do that on police shows. And that's where you actually have police officers, and that's the area that they are policing. If that individual beat, they're assigned to that. They may have subdivisions there, it goes beyond my knowledge of the police, but that's what we put together. And then you'll see this geometry. So these are the polygons I was mentioning, and you have some that are multi-polygons. That means they're drawn in several places, and some that are a single polygon. And that's just this shape that it can then put on a map. And we're going to see this happen very quickly. So let's go down to the bottom of the screen here, and we've got Tableau already telling us, go to the worksheet, because we've put our data together. Tableau is very helpful, and it's saying, go ahead, go to the worksheet. You can get started at this point. And so we'll click that, And it may take a moment there because your data is going to be prepped. So Tableau is now processing it in the background. Depending on your computer, may take a little longer, may take a little less. So we now have our blank canvas. And this is where we start to have fun with Tableau. So what we want to start with right away, so we've got our data pane here, and we've got all of the different fields from our police stop data and from our GeoJSON file. And we can see those all put together. Again, if my fonts are a little bit too small here, please be sure to be following along on your own screen. I'll try and be as descriptive as possible in talking about this because I want to make sure that you can see this. If you're on a smaller screen, my 4K may not translate very well. So let's start right away. We can just right click under the PD Beats GeoJSON file. Let's right click on geometry and add that to the sheet. And right away, we already have, and this is by far from working in a number of different geographic information systems in my tenure, this is by far the quickest way I have ever seen to be able to actually put a map together. So already right now, you should be at this point where you now have an overlay. You see that gray screen behind it. So that's an overlay built into Tableau of San Diego. And you can see it goes beyond San Diego County. And we now have these custom polygons here. So each of these items is a unique polygon that was drawn from our GeoJSON file. And it's been mapped right on top of San Diego very quickly. We just pulled it over and that's all we did at that point. So what we want to do now, let's start to name these. So let's take our beat name and we drag that over and we put it on the color. If you have a lot of categorical data, Tableau is going to pop up, warning you against adding all of it because it's going to get a little confusing, but let's go ahead and do it. So click add all members. It may take your system a little while here. And so right now, we now know what all the individual police beats are within for San Diego Police Department. So would you please repeat how we got to this canvas from the connections page? So from the data source page, just to go through that again, we pulled in the CSV, we dragged over our GeoJSON, created the join there, and then we went to the bottom left of Tableau and we clicked on add worksheet. Now it's showing up for me now as sheet 1 because we already had it, but it's right there at the bottom left. Please make sure to post any questions in the Q&A as well, because Ann and Jesse are working on there to answer any of your questions that come through. I'm trying to catch anything in the chat, but I may miss some of it there, so I'll try and put through on the Q&A. For the matching key, that's a great question that you've got there. For the matching key between these two items, so it's the beat number. So the police stop data, so every single stop that's recorded, the beat number is part of it. And then in our GeoJSON, we've got the beat number as well. And so we're able to connect the data that way. And so let me click back to our sheet and let's start to have a little bit more fun with it. Let's do a little bit more with that data. So there's one more question in the Q&A on the join. So when we dragged over our GeoJSON file, as we were dragging it in, let me show it with a different file here. So as we were dragging it in, that orange line showed up, and that's Tableau automatically knowing that we want to make a connection with our data. And so then after we dragged it and released it, we got this edit relationship, and we could have left it. The data actually would have worked just fine with Tableau's automatic many-to-many sum records matching, but we're data scientists. We want to control our data a little bit more here. So we know that we've got one beat in the GeoJSON to many in the police stops data. And we want all of our records in the police stops to show up. We don't want to miss any, even if there's not a matching beat. We don't really care if there's a beat that doesn't match to our data. If we need to go back and edit that anytime, we can just double click on it and it's going to pop up that relationship again. So I'm going to move forward, and I know we've got a few more questions in the Q&A, and Jesse and Ann will be able to answer those. So let's move forward with doing a little bit more with our map. So we've got our map, we've put it together, and now we know where every single beat is in San Diego County. Before we start adding a little bit more data, let's make this look a little bit nicer. So let's go up to the map, and we've got our map options that we can look at. We can rescale things if we need to. We also have map layers that are built into Tableau. So I often like to add the terrain. It's not, it's not too bad to add that in there. I often like the street view. because we start to see our locations a little bit better. And depending on our data, I like this view. It can get a little busy though, so let's wash it out a little bit, and we'll take it to 60% here, or somewhere around there. And so now we've got our beats overlaid on a very pretty map of San Diego. We can see where everything's located. Visually, it works a little bit better now. We know where the freeways are. So for those of us in San Diego, this makes a little more sense. For those outside of San Diego, I think this still starts to provide a little bit more context for what we're working with. So let's go ahead and name this, and we'll go SDPD beats. And we see right up at the top here, this label changed. That's because by default, you can just double click that to edit it. By default, Tableau is putting in the sheet name here. That's often a good place to start. We're gonna leave that alone. And so we have this pretty picture of the area. And if you hover over any of these individual beats, you'll see it's got the beat name. So Tableau is already putting that in there. You know where it is. And we can click on one, it highlights it a bit, and we can see the location a little bit more. There's a lot more data that we can add, but let's get into working with our data a little bit more. So we have our map, and so let's go ahead and duplicate this so we don't have to repeat it. And let's start to calculate something. And so, some of the fun of always doing these real time, I'm going to make some typos when I'm doing this. We're going to have errors. We're all going to have errors as we work together through this, and those things happen, and that's part of the learning. And so hopefully everybody is up at this point where we've got this basic map put together. And the way we got here, again, we just right-click geometry, added it to the sheet, and then we grabbed beat name, dragged it over into the color, and that did all this. That's all it took. We were able to go up to the map, go to the map layers, and we changed the layer to the street view, washed it out a bit, and we've got our map looking at that point. To duplicate this, all we have to do is right-click on any of the worksheets that we have, and there's just a duplicate right there, and it'll pop it over and adjust the name when we see that we add the two. So duplicating any worksheet, dashboard, or anything else we create is as easy as right-click and then click on duplicate. So what we want to do now is add in a count of stops. And so I'm going to just double click right here in that gray space. So not the space underneath the box. If you're looking on your computer, you'll see there's a space with the marks, and it's right underneath the geo collection. And just double click in that space, and that's going to give us a chance that we can type count. And Tableau, it's context sensitive. It's popping up as we start to type count with what we want. For this, we actually want to use count D. And so that's counting distinct. And let's count the stop IDs. And so we'll hit enter. So we've now created this count of stop IDs. To change to street view, we'll leave that question in the Q&A. That'll get answered there. So again, creating a field, we double clicked, we typed count, it popped up that we can use count D, and we add in our stop ID. And it's context sensitive for what we're working on. Let's get rid of the beat name now. We just drag that right off. We just click, drag it off. We're back to kind of their base chart. And so let's take that count of stop ID, we drag it up to color. And so we're starting to get a little bit more information. We're not quite there yet though. So let's drag the beat name back, and we're going to add it in our tooltip. And so we can, like I said, I messed that one up. We have our count and table calculation, our label, there we go. I have it drawing a complete blank, so apologies for that. It's the fun part about doing this live. So let's pull that out for 1 second. We're gonna add in race first. So we drag race, pull it up to our filters, and we can add our race filters on here. So we click use all. So we can do this anytime we're adding filter. I'm gonna go back to the count for in a moment here. So apologies for that. But it's the fun of Tableau. There are various things to play with. So we're gonna take that race again. We're gonna take race, drag it up into our filters. It's gonna give us an option for how we wanna filter this data. And let's just say use all for now and click apply. So race is behind the scenes for our information. And we wanna make this so it's a little more available for us to use, and it's gonna make more sense in a second. So we're gonna click this arrow next to race and go to show filter. And so we see over on the right-hand side now, the various races as they're recorded in our police data set. So I never want to present myself as any sort of expert at all about discussions on race. And so the labeling here is straight out of the police data set. That's how they created it. So, there's no edits from there. If we want to change our filter, there's a little arrow at the top right of the box, and we can just click that, and everything in Tableau, there's either an arrow or a right-click option that's available. And let's change that to a single value list so we can filter our data in this manner. It's not telling us much yet, though. We're not really getting a lot of insight out of it at this point. So we do need to start to aggregate our data a bit. And so I want to show what we're working towards. Let me drag it over because it's been a little bit since we saw that first tool that we used. So what we want to get to is having this level of information. And I showed at the beginning there that we want to create this dashboard where we can see our various stops and we can filter by race. And we didn't really go into detail that this is what we're creating, but we showed this at the front here. So we want to be able to create a dashboard so that we can see stops by beat and be able to filter by race. And so that's how we're building this. And so what we want to do here, let's bring that count back. So again, to create a count in here, we can just double click and we start to type count. We want the count to distinct. We bring in stop ID. We've got our context sensitive menu that's telling us what's going on. And again, we brought our count back. We're again going to drag that up to our color. Right now, see, it's just counting for everything. So it's not quite where we want it to be just yet. We need to add a little bit more information on here. So we're going to take that beat name. We're going to add that to the detail. And now we start to get a little bit more information. So in Tableau, anytime that something's not quite working right, it's often that the level of detail isn't there. So you saw as I was going through it and got a little discombobulated there, we added in the count and it just counted for everything, gave us one blue blob across everywhere. But what we really wanted was to have that count by beat. We don't need the color coding by beat anymore. We got rid of it, but we just dragged that beat over, added the detail, and now it's separating. Anything in Tableau, if it's not working right, up at the top here, you can just go back. You can go back and forwards. So if you have a mistake, if something's not looking right, you can just go back at any time and then you can go back to it. But I want to show what I did there again. So we started here where we have just our polygons in with the beats. We dragged race into the filters so that we can see that. And what we're doing is in this space here, we double click, we start to type the count. We'll use the context sensitive menu. We're counting the distinct stops. The reason that we're using a count distinct rather than count is that we know our data has both a stop ID and a person ID for every stop. Some stops have multiple people involved. So if we didn't count the distinct stop IDs, our data would be a little off there. That we'd be overcounting because we're counting people stops as opposed to individual stops. What we do at this point is we go back to beat name. Let's drag that into our detail. And then we do our color coding by stop ID. So we take the count that we created, drag that up into count, and we see our color coding now by stop ID. So we can see over on the right-hand side that within our data set, we've got from 0 to 22,746. So within our data set by beat, that's how the data is showing up. If there are colors, I see there are questions coming through on the Q&A. I think we've got folks answering those. So I don't have the comments up right at this moment. So we have our count, it's color coding that way. We can see some of our filters here. If you're not seeing the filter menu, what you do after you've dragged race over into the filters, just click the little arrow. There's a little white down arrow on the bar there. Click that and then click show filter, and that's going to make it appear over on the right. Once you have the filter showing on the right, there's another arrow there and you can change the type of filter it is. In this case, it's a single value list that we're using, so we can click between these. The blue color coding doesn't quite work for me. Tableau, so what we do is we go over here, we click colors, and then we click edit colors. and we have a whole different color scale we can use. For certain type of charts, Tableau actually has a built-in color scale for the colorblind, and it's really great to use. Unfortunately, on these types of charts, that's not available. So I'll often use the temperature diverging. So we just click that, click apply, hit OK, and now we have our temperature diverging count of individual police stops within each beat within San Diego, or by SDPD. We have our filter over here of our race. And so we can actually click through at this point. And so we have our chart. So we know overall where our stops are occurring for everybody. But then we can see as we click through, what about for Asian, Black or African American, Hispanic, Latino, Middle Eastern or South Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander, and white. So this is creating a tool at this point where we can start to see where things are occurring. We don't have actionable insight at this point, which is something we always want to get to, but this starts to build that tool that we can do a lot more with. And you know, we've gone through it a couple times. Hopefully everyone's caught up at this point, but there isn't that much that we had to do. We pulled in 2 files, dragged a couple items over, we created a distinct count, and that's all we had to do to create this visual representation of all the police stops that have occurred, and we can start to see them by race. One item that I want to change is up here, we've got the title. So I want everybody to double click that, please. And we talked about earlier on that Tableau automatically puts in whatever your sheet name is. In this case, the sheet name isn't great. It's just SDPD beats with a 2 by it. We don't want that. But we also know we have a filter. We want to make it a little bit better. So we're going to leave sheet name there, click after it. Let's add a colon, space, and then we go up to this insert, and Tableau starts to tell us what we can add in here. And so let's go ahead and add our race variable, click apply, okay. And let's change this name a little bit more. Let's do SDPD stop count by race. A little bit lengthy for a worksheet name, but it starts to tell us. As we change our race, we'll see it's changing right up there in the title on our screen of who we're looking at, or the race, the count of police stops by race, by beat within San Diego. Now, to get actionable insight, we'd probably want to overlay information for population in those areas so we can start to see differences that way a little bit more. For this, we don't have that data pulled in. We want to keep this a little bit simpler, but this is an advanced technique of pulling in geographic information that we're able to do with 2 files. We quickly downloaded, we dragged a couple items, put them together, and hopefully everybody can see that as you get more comfortable with Tableau, this really is something that can take 5 minutes to get to this point. As we're learning Tableau, it takes a lot longer to get through it. That's with any system, and there's some nuances to Tableau that always get funny, but we're able to do that very quickly. So one other item I want to show everybody is, because I want to make sure we touch charts a little bit, let's change this up and do a chart like this. So actually putting together a bar chart, and let's start to compare things a little bit more. So we'll move away from doing our geographic chart for a moment, because we've got this put together. It's great information, but it may not be the end for us on where we want to get to. And let's add in another chart here. So for this, I want to create a field, and this is really is not necessary with the data, but I think it helps a little bit. So I'm just going to make things easy for me. And so what we did to get to the new sheet, we just clicked on down at the bottom left of our screen. There's a little icon. It's to add a new sheet. We just click that, and it's going to add a new sheet in there for us. We're not duplicating one at this point. We're just creating a new one. So blank canvas, all fresh, good to go. On the left-hand side, on the data pane, we're going to go over to stop ID. So you'll see that under the police stops data, and it is alphabetical in there between the dimensions of the measures. So let's go to stop ID. We're going to right-click it, and we're going to create calculated field. And so this, we're just going to call stop ID person ID. And so this gets a little bit more advanced with functions, not some of the most advanced functions that Tableau can do, because Tableau has the ability to pull in R script and Python script, and there's so much power you can do it with it. We're not going to go into that. This is just creating basic field. So I want to create a field that's the combination of the stop ID and the person ID. And we see that Tableau pops up with helpful hints as we're going through this. Both the stop ID, looking over here, it's got a little number next to it. So both stop ID and person ID, Tableau reads those as numbers. So if I add them together, this is going to give me a new number. It's going to actually numerically add them, but it's not going to give us a unique stop ID and person ID that we'd like to do if we want to start counting people that are involved in the stops. Just a reminder, as we're going through all this, everything is recorded. It's going to be up on the YouTube later. So there will be an opportunity to be able to go back and view any of this if any of it's gone too fast, or if you just want to review it later on. So going back to the new field we're creating a combination of stop ID and person ID. Since these are numbers, it would just add them together, and I don't want that to occur. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do this expression in front, str. What that is it converting to a string. Anyone familiar with Access or SQL or really any language, you have in every language an availability to convert the type of data you're working with. We could have changed the field type within Tableau itself, but I want to just do this in equation and kind of leave the data alone. So I'm just adding that string in front of it. So I add str and parentheses around the stop ID. I'm going to do the same with PID. And so right here, we can click apply, our calculation is valid. And what we've done is we've taken stop ID and person ID and combined them together into a new field. Not added them numerically, but actually concatenated them so they're now a unique ID that's put together. And we can hit OK. So we now have this stop ID, person ID that's been added together. What I want to do now is drag that field up into the rows. And it may take a second for Tableau to go through it. Not overly useful information how it's put together here, because we don't want to actually look at the numbers. We don't care what those unique identifiers are. What we do want to do is do a unique count of them. And I clicked out onto the wrong field here, so we'll change this up a moment. So count, and we've got our count distinct that we're doing. And again, that's so that if the numbers are repeated, Tableau won't count the repeats anymore. And then we'll add back in, if I hadn't done a typo before, the stop ID and person ID. So another way we can do this other than dragging is, because I want to make sure to show that in Tableau, you can always drag things over, but you can also double click in any of those spaces to add something. So the other way of doing it, we go up to rows, double click, we start to type count, it pops up with our dynamic menu, and then we start to type stop. We've got our stop ID, person ID, that's the new field we created, and we can put that in there, and that's our distinct count of stops and people. So these aren't individual police stops, these are individual people that were stopped per stop. So it's a little bit higher number than if we just looked at the number of police stops that occurred. So we've got our distinct count, so there are 356,204 people stopped by SDPD during the time period that was involved in our data set.
Sorry, Matthew, this is Ibrahim. One request that I would like to make. We need to be a little bit slow down because unfortunately, I'm not sure it's a Zoom problem or whatever his problem is that when you type down and then the process happens to be presented in a very fast way. So like I said, that might be your computer issue or that would be a Zoom problem. So just try to be as slow as possible. That would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let me go through that again for everybody. So hopefully it's showing up well. It's one thing with Zoom, I wish I could see what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll actually do a separate login so I can see the screen that's being presented to everybody. So hopefully everyone has the blank canvas. If not, go down to the bottom of the screen and click the little worksheet icon. It's the third from the bottom right of that little menu at the bottom. Hopefully you can all see my mouse there. So we've got our blank screen. So up at the top under rows, we're going to double click, and that's going to give us a little menu that we can type in. So at that point, we just start to type, and we type count. So there's a menu that pops up. So all I've typed is COU at this point. Tableau is giving me a context sensitive menu. And so it's telling me what my options are with count. I'm going to click the one that says count D. So that's counting distinct items. It just works a little bit better with this data set. Oftentimes you would just be using standard count. I'm going to start typing stop. So STOP, and it's pulling up all of the different fields that are available with stop. And the one we want to use is a stop ID PID field that we created. And so it's got that in the menu now. So it's count ID, open parentheses, open bracket, stop ID underscore PID, close bracket, close parentheses. And so that's a calculation that's stopping, counting all the distinct stop IDs and PIDs that are within our data set. So we hit enter at that point, and we now have Tableau's put together a bar chart for us. If we hover our mouse over it, we get a count of 356,000 unique person stops that have occurred. This doesn't tell us all that much by itself, just tells us what's happened. But we want to try and look into race for this. So we just go over to our data pane, scroll down to where race is. Again, these are in alphabetical order. We just click that, we drag it over, and we release it in the column section. And so now we're starting to get a bar chart. Still not telling us a lot, but we're getting there. One thing is everything is a little bit crunched up here. So one of the things we can do, we go up to our toolbar, and there's a drop-down menu where it says standard, and we can change that to fit width, fit height, or entire view. And so that Tableau is going to dynamically make sure everything fits. So in this case, I want the entire view used, and we'll see that on our toolbar now instead of standard, it says entire view. And so we've been able to expand our bar chart a bit. We can see our items a little bit more. My lettering probably shows up a little bit small, so apologies for that. But we can see what's going on here on your screens. Hopefully you've got to this point, and so you'll see those bar charts that are coming through. So all we have at this point is we have race in columns, and we have our distinct count of the stop ID PID field that we created sitting in rows. Let's add a little bit more information here, and let's color code now by the result of the stop. And so we go to our data pane, go find result, we drag that over into color, and so now we've color coded all of the counts by race of what's occurred for that stop. So what was the result of each individual stop that occurred? Out on the left, our icon will change a little bit. Our cursor will change from the normal arrow to kind of a two-sided arrow, and we can drag our legend a little bit there if we want to be able to read things a bit. And I see a question in here about putting some notes together. So again, the video is going to be posted on YouTube. I'll also put some other notes together walking through this, and there's and we'll put that up in our hub as well, just so everybody can walk through that. There's a lot of this to do. If you have the Show Me pane and it's showing up and making your data look bad, just click where it says Show Me, and that'll go away. So at this point, we've dragged race into columns. We've dragged result over color. And so we've got our color coding. We have our distinct count that's been created. Still not telling us all that much information for something that we can make a decision based on. What we can do, though, is we can go up to count, and let's change this to a quick table calculation, which this gets into where Tableau starts to get a little more confusing on how it works with data. So I'm going to go through what to do, but there's a whole lot more behind this that can be done. It gets very powerful with Tableau. But what we're going to do, and I want to walk through that again, we went up to the distinct count of the stop ID. We hit the drop-down arrow. We're going to go down to quick table calculation, hover over it, and then we're going to go to percent of total. And we start to get a little bit more information, but it's still not quite right. So we're going to click that arrow one more time, and we're going to compute using, and we're going to say table down. And so this starts to change our data a little bit, and we get something that makes a little bit more sense. And we're going to right click on this axis, edit axis, because it looks a little weird. It goes to 105. Let's change it to fixed. And we're just going to type in 1. So that's going to give us a scale from 0% to 100%. We just closed that. And the way we got to that again was that we just went over the axis, right clicked, and hit edit axis. So now we can see by race what the percentage of the total stops were for the results that occurred. So for example, we can see that of all the stops, the result for white for citation for the infraction was 24%. If we go over to Middle Eastern or South Asian, we see that our distinct count, our percentage of everything, it was 40% for them. So we start to see differences in the results of police stop by our various races that are in the data. We can add one more item here, and we do want to make sure we add a lot of time today for questions, because I know we're going through a lot with Tableau. And I'm really hoping we do a lot more with Tableau in the future. I want to give everybody a flavor of it. I want to give everyone a taste of what you can do with Tableau. We've covered some basic functions. We've also touched on some advanced functions. So this is just that introduction, getting to know Tableau, and hopefully we can do more specific areas of instruction later on. So let's add one more item to this chart before we move on and make sure that we're getting questions here. If you don't have the legend showing, let's just get rid of result for a moment. We can add it back in. So over on our data pane, we click result, we drag it over to color, and it's going to drop in there, and you should see the legend at this point. If you're, it should show up there. So one other item that we want to do here, let's start to look at our data because we've got the results. What was the reason for the stop? So we're going to go back to our data pane one last time. We're going to drag the reason for the stop over into our filters. That's going to give us this menu that lets us just apply a filter up front, but we want to make this dynamic. We want to be able to look through things more. So we're going to click use all, hit apply, and hit OK. Now at this point, you see absolutely nothing has changed on your chart. We've done a filter, but we haven't actually filtered anything. So what we want to do here, and we're going to hover over, and that little arrow is going to show up again. And so much in Tableau is always going to be based on a little arrow on the right-hand side. And so we go to the drop-down, and let's go show filter. So now, over at the right, we start to have a bit more information that's showing up here. I don't think this data is overly useful for being in a checkbox form. So again, we're going to go to the arrow on the right. We're going to click that, and let's change to single value list. And so we now have our option buttons here. Finally, make this a little bit cleaner. We're going to change the name a little bit. So STPD person stop counts. And we've got that in our label. So we did that just by double clicking on the worksheet name, typing in there. Tableau always has up in this label, it defaults to showing whatever the worksheet is. Let's double click that. So show that one more time. We go up to this text box, double click. We've got our sheet name. Let's add a colon, and let's add in the filter that we're going to apply. So reason for stop. So colon space, we go over to insert, and we click down and we do reason for stop. Hit apply, hit OK. So we see now STPD person stop counts for all reasons. If we go over to the right-hand side now, we can now click through. So why did this stop occur? So if it was a traffic violation. And now we can see across all the different races, so if someone was stopped for a traffic violation, what percent had the different results? So we see for white, we have citation for infraction was 48%. If we go to Hispanic Latino, it was 40%. So of the population that was cited, we can see that, so this is of the population that was stopped for a traffic violation, that 40% of Hispanic Latinos resulted in receiving a citation for the infraction. For white, it was 48%. Remember, there are a lot of other results that are occurring here. So, if that's a surprising number to anyone, we also need to make sure we're looking at some of the other items. So there's a verbal warning that was provided. So 26% there, close to that number for white as well. One other item I want to run through somewhat quickly. I was hoping to stop right at 11:30 for the questions and answers, but I want to do one last thing really quick. So with looking at this data, we're going to right click on this worksheet and we're going to hit duplicate. And now I want to pull race out. And chart doesn't look all that great how it is. So now we have a chart of how every police stop or police person stop that occurred, how did they all result? So again, for a traffic violation, we've got the filter on. The 43% were cited for infraction. If we go back to our item by race, now we can see, okay, well, with Middle Eastern and South Asian, it was 53%. So our population showed of traffic violations showed 43% resulted in a citation. But then with Middle Eastern or South African or South Asian, excuse me, it was 53%. And that's where we start to have these items that we may want to dig into a little bit more. And we can see with our data something we put together quickly. Our last item with this, this is an item that we want to show later on. It's not something we can go through in too much detail today. This is creating our worksheets, but they're also the dashboards. And that's if we want to see two of these together. So I'm going to run through that really quick. We're going to open it for questions and conclude the day. So down at the bottom, we've been clicking at the third from the right, where it's a new worksheet. We want to do the second from the right, that's a new dashboard. And so we click that and we have this dashboard. It doesn't really look all that useful how it is. We're going to go to size. And so we're going to click the arrow on size and we're going to change that to automatic. That's going to make this work a little bit better for our computer screens. So again, we click new dashboard from our menu here. It's the second from the right. We went up to size and we changed it to automatic. And so we have a couple of charts that we've put together. Haven't labeled them well yet, but that's okay for these purposes. So we're going to go to that second one we made that didn't have race, and we're going to click and we're going to drag it over. So that starts to put it on our dashboard. We're going to also take the first one we created and we're going to drag that next to it. And as you're dragging, I'm not sure that the gray is showing up through Zoom, but you'll see in different places as you move it around, still holding down your mouse button, you start to see this gray box. That's telling you where it's going to go. So we're going to go to where we have a large vertical box on the right-hand side of our existing data, and we're going to release that. And so now we've got side by side here, our total population, and then our population by race. And so in the middle here, we see our cursor changes. We're going to drag that over a bit so everything's sized a little bit closer together. We're going to do the same over on this side here. Let's make these a little bit larger so we can read them better, which sometimes my cursor doesn't want to behave. There we go. And then one last thing we want to do with this, or two last things, excuse me, we can see at the bottom, these are a little off. So for this, I'm going to show a little trick that we can do to do this really quickly. There are other items that we can do as well to make it work, but we can see we have labels on one chart, no labels on the other. It throws things off. So at the bottom here, I'm going to take a little blank object and I'm going to drag around. And again, there's that light gray box that's occurring. I want a little light gray box at the bottom of just that one chart. I'm going to release that. And I'm going to drag it down here, resize it a little bit until our scales are lined up. Finally, right-hand side, and there's a lot here. Again, the video is recorded. We're going to take, as we see, we have our filters duplicated because we have one filter for each sheet. We're going to click on the lower one, and then there's a little X that shows up. We're going to remove that. On the upper one, we're going to click that one. And then this time, there's a little arrow that's on the left-hand side when we show it up. We're going to click that arrow and apply to worksheets and selected worksheets. And we're going to say everything on this dashboard. And we just click that and hit OK. And what happens now is as we change our filter, we have two different vises that are showing up. And with the titles here, it doesn't quite work. So we're just going to click over, right click, do hide title, and do that one more time, the other one, hide title. And so we can see as we shift for what the reason for a stop was. So let's go with, I'm trying to read through these here, reasonable suspicion. So now we have with reasonable, if somebody was stopped for reasonable suspicion, what was the result of the stop by race compared to our total? And we can hover over to see what those labels are. There are ways to add the labels to the chart as well. and that way it would actually show up on here a little bit better. There's a lot more that we can do with all this, but this is our start here. And so we can start to see now and actually start to gather information from this. For everyone that was stopped for reasonable suspicion, what was the outcome by race compared to the population? And so that starts to give us some insights here that we can look into and dig into differences. So if it was citation for infraction, why was it different for one race versus the other? If it was a verbal warning that was provided, why is that? Why are each race different from our overall population? Now, in R and Python, I think we may have touched on p-values. I'm not sure we got there, but statistical significance. So if anyone has had that sort of class, we're not showing that. That's possible in Tableau. If you haven't had a statistics class and discussed p-values, then don't worry about what I'm saying. But this starts to give us some insight within our population with a dashboard that's dynamic. We can change what our reasons for the stop were. We can look at all of them. We can compare individual races to the overall population regarding what the result was. So I've gone a little bit over on my time. I know a lot of this is fast to go through, so please remember that the YouTube is, this will be published to the YouTube. We'll also put some notes together on how to do these things, and we'll be publishing these up to our portal. So that is the last item that I want to mention. This is a quick and easy one. So that very first chart where we put together the SDPD beats, that is what the homework is going to be. So we need to be able to publish that. So Tableau Public is one of the downsides we talked about up front. You can't save the files locally. You have to save them to Tableau Public. That's where everything goes there. So that original beats one, we want to go to File, save to Tableau Public as. It'll pop up with your login. So when you create your Tableau Public account, your email address, your password, it'll pop up with that if it's your first time doing it in Tableau. I've already logged in, so it doesn't give me login information. Give it a title, San Diego Police Department Beats, and hit save. And that's all it takes. It's preparing the different views that have been put together. It's sending the data up to the Tableau public server. Remember that data and everything is going to be public at that point. It's going to pop up then in Tableau Public. It'll pop up your default web browser. And there you can see the viz you created with the beat names. You can see right there your map of San Diego. It's on Tableau Public. It's part of your profile. And so that's what will be done for the homework. I will put written instructions together for that. We'll get that up in the hub for everybody to review. So I've gone slightly over on time. I want to hand it over to Dr. Tarshizi at this point, I believe, and we will go back to our presentation.